Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to make a quick video about replacement PlayStation disk drives. You can find these replacement disk drives on AliExpress all over the place from many different sellers, and most people will suggest that you should not get one of these. But curiosity got the better of me, and I have this right here, PlayStation SCPH-9000 model, and this one has had kind of an interesting disk drive. Sometimes the head would lock up next to the motor so it would not be able to move it any further and just keep slurping the disc and not actually see anything. Also, the motor was a bit messed up, so playback was a bit of an issue. A lot of the times it would cause weird glitches in some games, like texture glitches and stuff. It was very fascinating, but it was pretty much unusable, so I thought this is a good opportunity to try out one of these Chinese disk drives. This particular model is the KSM440 AEM, and what you need to know about PlayStation disk drives is that basically all of the fat model PlayStations have sort of unreliable disk drives, and the only one that is actually somewhat trustworthy is the one that came in the PS1, the slim console. So eventually you're probably going to run into some kind of problem with your PSX disk drive unless you have the PS1 model, and no matter how much tweaking I do on that disk drive, it's basically a lost cause. So it came in this little box, and I believe there was probably some kind of padding in there. I'm not sure where that went, but it was packaged fairly well. I've heard horror stories of these just completely not working, broken out of the box, and I have actually had experience with some third-party disk drives before, but those were absolutely terrible. Barely functional, and the lasers were all over the place. One of them had to be tuned all the way up to even see the disc. It was just horrible. But I was curious to see what I would get for about $20 or so. This is the model AEM disk drive. AEM is the one that will work in the 9000 consoles. Sony, in their infinite wisdom, decided to change around where the disk drive connector is on the motherboard, so not all the models will work with every single disk drive. You need to make sure you get the right disk drive for the right console. Like for instance, BAM and AAM will work for the 1000 consoles, as well as the PS1. They actually have the connectors in the same spot. So the first thing I did when I received the disk drive is to check what the potentiometer is set to, because oftentimes they will not dial in the laser properly for a console. And for this, I did not actually use any guides as to what the recommended value should be. Instead, what I do is I just basically turn it all the way up, so increase the impedance, which makes the laser reduce its power. By default, the disk drive came set up to around 700 something ohms, which is very low, so I had to increase it up to around 1200, 1300 ohms and see what it does. The way I like to test it is I will test it with original discs, see how well they perform, and I would also test it with well burnt discs. By that I mean properly burnt discs that will work fine. If you want to know how to burn PS1 games properly, check out the recommended video on the card. So the idea is that I basically want to dial in the laser to the point where it can read original discs perfectly and can read well burnt discs perfectly. I may actually throw in a badly burnt CD as well, as in it's not a high quality burn. It will have reading issues on many consoles, and make sure that that reads badly. If that reads well, then your laser is set too high. You don't want the bad CDRs to play fine. You want the good CDRs to play fine. So like I said, when I tested it out, I've tested it with good discs, good CDRs, and original discs. And I've settled on a value on the potentiometer of between 1200 and 1100. Probably closer to 1200. Now this value will probably not work for you. These will all have to be dialed in separately on their own. They're all working a little bit differently. So I'm not saying that you should set it to that, I'm saying you should test it to see what works best. At that point the disk drive was working perfectly, however I did hear some kind of clunkiness from the motor itself, so it seemed like it was having a bit of a hard time spinning the disc. And I didn't want to make this video immediately when I bought it, because I needed to test it properly. So I've been using it for a couple months now. And the problem has kind of become a bit worse, to the point where, as you can see, it's not actually booting the game, even though this is an original pressed disc. Now what could be causing this? I'm fairly certain this is just the motor not being up to spec. It could be some crappy, well, let's be honest, it's an AliExpress disk drive motor. The good thing is that you can actually just replace this. The disk drive motor is replaceable. You just have to desolder the positive and negative leads from the disk drive and then put on a new motor. So I'm not too worried about that. However, the weird thing is that it actually just seems to have to warm up a little bit. That's kind of odd. But let me show you what happens. So as you can see, it still has the original disk in there. If I reset the console now, there's a good chance it's actually going to boot up. Because the disk drive has just been spinning, warming up the motor, and if I try enough times, it's gonna work. The odd thing is that it actually works better with a CDR than a pressed disk. So if I just try to turn it on cold and then let it read a CDR, it's most likely going to actually work. And I think I know the reason why. An original pressed disk is actually going to be a lot heavier than a CDR. By a lot, I mean it's not a huge difference, it's only a couple grams. But it means that our CD motor has to work a lot less. So weirdly enough, it's actually going to most likely boot a CDR when it cannot boot a pressed disk. And I think that perfectly explains our situation. That being a weak motor, or a motor that needs to kind of warm up before it gets to that point where it can play discs perfectly. This is a burnt disc. This is a good burnt disc actually. On a Tayoyuden disc, this is a copy of Mizuna Falls. Absolutely no FMV skipping.
6:13 a.m. on the 25th of December. A small town in Colorado, at the foot of the Rocky Mountains called Mizuna Falls. A girl was found in woods on the outskirts of the town, 4 months nearly dead. The girl named Kathy Furman has scars by an animal's claws all over her body. It seems she was attacked by a bear.
Now let's try our pressed disc again and see what happens. Don't worry about the image going a bit fuzzy, it's just this card cable is a little bit loose, it's kind of a crappy cable. And there we go, it booted. So now it can play the pressed discs as well, because I think the motor has warmed up and it's not struggling to read the disc anymore. However, there is FMV skipping, which is very weird, right? Like, how is that even possible? Can I make better CDRs than a pressed disc? I mean, maybe, but I think it's due to the weight of the disc. So the motor has to work a bit harder. Now this is actually going to go away eventually. So if we just let it play the videos for a while, let it warm up a little bit, it's actually going to stop skipping the FMVs and it's going to read the disc perfectly. So like I said, I'm not too worried about this. However, like I said, if it needs to be replaced, I can replace it. It's fine.
I'm gonna pop your neck with my hands.
So I've been letting the console play the game for like a good 10 minutes or so, and I reset it so that we can see if it can actually play back these FMVs without stuttering now. So this is again driver 2, press disc with the AliExpress disk drive, warming up for like a good 10-15 minutes now. So as you can see, it can play these FMVs basically perfectly now without any skipping. So one thing about this disk drive as well is that the spindle itself is pretty tight. I'm not sure if it's tolerances or it's because it's brand new, but it grips the disc fairly hard, so you need to be careful when you're removing it. Not so much when you're putting it on, you'll just feel that it's kind of just, you know, snaps in place very hard. But if you know how to remove a CD, and you don't try to remove it like a monkey, you know, don't remove it like this, don't hold it by the edges, for God's sake. people complaining the spindle comes off when they're removing the disc like this, like an absolute ape. You need to hold it in the middle and then lift it up with your thumb like that. It's not very complicated. Other than that, I think the way they made this disk drive is that they use a brand new housing and new motor with a new spindle. They sell all that stuff. But when it comes to the laser, I think the housing is original. They've just sort of replaced the internals of it, so put a new laser into that. I think that's an awesome approach, and I really like that. It's not a used machine, but the laser itself, the housing, does have some fine, you know, patina on it. Not exactly rust, just, you know, it doesn't look perfect. But I think that just means it's sort of a used housing with new internals. Let's crack this thing open and take a closer look at the disk drive. So like I said, this is a SCPH-9002 console, PAL region mod chipped. No disc inside, hopefully. Okay, let's take that out. And then lift this up. So as you can tell, that doesn't look completely new here. There's some slight patina on that metal. So if you don't know how to check the impedance on the disk drive, you basically put your multimeter into I'm not sure how to put it so you can actually see it. You put your multimeter into impedance mode. I like to put it on 2000 ohms range, and then just basically prod those two tiny little legs right there. It's kind of difficult to do because these are very, very tiny points, but if all goes well, as you can see, yeah, set to 1180 ohms, so that's where it worked perfectly. But it came at like around 800 ohms, which is way too low. So I definitely recommend checking this and then increasing if you have to. You just basically have to have like a tiny little screwdriver with which you can twist that potentiometer and twist it up to a higher value so you can save the laser's life. Another reason I kind of took it apart is just to show it. They haven't really used a lot of lubricant in there, so I am actually going to apply some to it to hopefully prolong its life even more. Because, I mean, you know, who knows how these are constructed, so they could still be using the exact same blueprints of the original disk drives, which would always fail eventually. So I'm going to put a little bit of lubricant down this rail here, because this is like sort of the #1 failure point on the old drives. This wears out and then becomes loose. Hopefully we've just prevented that. And we also want to put a little bit of it maybe over here. I could put it on this one because it slides through this one too. When it starts moving, it's just gonna sort of, you know, distribute it. And also on this rail here, down here. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a metal rail here on which it's sliding, or maybe not even metal. It could be all plastic. That's a generous amount. It will kind of like spread it across by itself as it will move around. It will potentially make it a little bit quieter as well. Make sure you don't get any on the lens itself. Yeah, I think this is good enough. Oh yeah, I believe also, if I remember right, sorry, this has been a while ago, but I think this didn't come with this cable right here, which is the power cable for the disk drive. Just had to reuse the original power cable from the original disk drive. I believe it didn't come with it. I'm fairly certain. Plug it all back in and we're good to go. You can kind of see the modification down there. There's some wires going over there, This is the mod chip installation. This is a dumb mod chip, it's not a stealth one, so, you know, won't play those games that have some kind of mod chip protection, but yeah. Overall, I think this disk drive is actually pretty decent. It's much better than I expected. It's not perfect, however, it is certainly serviceable, quite literally, and if I ever have any issues with the motor dying, then I can just replace that. But like I said, if I let it run for a while, it works perfectly fine. Now how long will that last? I don't know, I might make an update video on this in the future. But compared to all the horror stories I hear, this is actually not a bad unit. I mean, is it safe to get any of these? I mean, I don't know. If you're feeling lucky or feeling adventurous, you could try to get one of these and you might get a half-decent unit like I did. Worst case scenario, it's not going to work at all. Best case scenario, I don't know. But either way, you need to make sure you tweak the laser if you want it to last longer, because by default they send it with way too strong of a laser. Anyways, I'm just going to keep using this console for as long as I can. But yeah, it is quite comical to me how it tends to work better with burnt discs because of their weight than pressed discs. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it entertaining or useful in any way. And yeah, see you in the next one.